Hi there, Year 6. Hopefully you're enjoying literacy so far and that you had a successful day yesterday writing your first paragraph from Florian's perspective in the diary entry. So today we're going to be carrying on with writing our second paragraph as we normally would do in normal literacy lessons. So as a quick do now, I want you to look on the board and try and identify the embedded clauses within the paragraphs. And just a reminder that embedded clauses are kept within the main clause. So embedded are usually in the middle. So hopefully that gives you a clue. You might want to pause it now and give yourself about 20 to 30 seconds to try and work out where the embedded clauses are in this paragraph. So hopefully you had an opportunity to do that. Just the reminder, embedded are in the middle of the main clause, which makes sense on its own, and a clause is a bit of a sentence. So I've highlighted in red here on the screen the embedded clauses which I identified. So you've got here in the first bit, my freedom. So it was the first day of school. My carefree life, dash, my freedom, dash, was gone. So you can see the embedded clause being separated by dashes here. And the next example I saw was Mr. Munnings, dash, who was inspecting the line, dash, turned to look at me. So the embedding clause in both these examples are separated using dashes, but they can also be separated using commas as well, which you might want to use in your writing later. So in today's paragraph, we're going to be using colons, which we obviously covered last week. But just in case you weren't there or you didn't see it or you didn't watch the video, then we're just going to quickly recap so we're all familiar once again with what colons are and why you might use them. So colons are used for two main reasons. Firstly, they can be used to introduce lists of items or things. And that was, I say, the way we were most successful in using last week when I read your work. So you've got two examples here. He was going to buy three things, colon, chairs, tables, and utensils. Or in the second example, John wrote, colon, I wish you a happy new year. So in these two examples here, colon is used before introducing a list, and it doesn't always have to be a list as in most explicit in that first case. It can also be John wrote and the list of what he wrote, or it can be Mr. Bell said and the list of what he said, or she thought. You can do a colon then. So it's just when you're about to introduce or list something, that's the first way in which it can be used. The second way, which is, I think, the way which people struggle with the most, judging by the writing last week, is that colons can be used to connect independent clauses which make sense on their own. And you can use a colon to connect two sentences when the second sentence summarizes, sharpens, or explains the first. But it's important to remember that both sentences should be complete and their content should be related to each other. So that means that it shouldn't be completely random, these two parts of the sentence. Although they're independent, meaning they can make sense on their own, they should also be relevant content to each other. So you've got the example here. They will not make it, colon, the storm is too strong. It might be a nice opportunity now to pause this video and sit either on your own or if you're in community classroom with the rest of your class and think about what other examples of sentences can you think of with a colon being used to separate two independent clauses? So hopefully you had the opportunity to do that. What we're going to do now is we're going to spot the colons in the second paragraph. So now, again, this might be a nice opportunity to pause this video now and just read through the second paragraph and try and spot them. I will read the second paragraph out loud. And so this will hopefully give you more of an idea about, and while you're listening to it, think about why these colons are used. So to be clear, if I'd just been alone, I might have preferred to die, as I didn't have much to live for. However, I had to think of my unborn baby. I could feel it squirming inside my stomach. I felt a mother's instinct that I had to protect it until the end. I had not eaten a proper meal in days, apart from berries from the forest, ice cold water from the stream, and some potatoes from a field. For now, all I wanted to do was sleep. So you've got two examples of colons being used here. The first one is in between stomach and I felt. So I could feel it squirming inside my stomach, colon, I felt a mother's instinct that I had to protect it until the end. You can see here, this is an example of a colon being used to separate two independent clauses. However, you'll notice that the content of them is relevant to each other. So she's commenting how she felt her baby in her stomach, and the relevant context is that she felt the instinct to protect her baby until the end. They make sense separately, but they are related content even. And the second example, which I see is, this is being used in a different way before a list. So you've got here, I had not eaten a proper meal in days apart from, colon, berries from the forest, ice cold water from the stream, and some potatoes from a field. So in your writing today, perhaps you will feel more confident with using the colons before a list, but do try to use them in both contexts as well. And here's this red just really highlighting where the colons were in the model text in the second paragraph. So At this point in the lesson now, we'd have a talk task. What I'd want you to do is up-level the phrases below using colons, and can you explain their use? So this might be a nice opportunity now to pause the video and give yourself a minute this time, I say, to think, how can you up-level the sentences here? And also as a challenge, can you explain their use in both situations? So hopefully you had a nice opportunity to go through those. Just to explain where the colon should be. In the first example here, you've got Dave found that he could only do one thing when he saw the giant, colon, tremble in fear. And so that's being used to list, that colon's been used in order to introduce something and explain what he was going to do. Second example, Punchy had many powers, colon, super strength, super speed, and super hearing. This is a clear example of a colon being used before a list. The third example, Marcia and Hugh have two lovely daughters, colon, Paige and Eliza, and that's because that's a list naming the two daughters. And finally, this fourth example, I think, is a really, really clear example of a colon being used to separate independent clauses with related context. So she got what she worked for, colon, she really earned that promotion. So what are you going to be doing for your task today? So I want you today to use colons correctly in writing to write your second paragraph of your diary entry, remembering it's from Florian's perspective. So what you might want to do now is you might want to pause your video and read back over the paragraph you wrote over yesterday, because just like it would be in a lesson, paragraph 2 has to follow on and be coherent. It makes sense following on from paragraph 1. So you might want to remind yourself of what you wrote about yesterday in order for today's paragraph to make sense and nicely follow on. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to do that. Here's are some steps to success at the side of what I want you to write about in your writing today. So I want you to write, how does Florian feel when he sees the Russian splattered over Amelia? What has he eaten recently? And when has he last slept? What I've answered those questions are possible answers you might have. However, it would be great for you to write your own answers and have your own ideas, in your writing today. And I've written here as a challenge, I want you to include ellipses in your writing to try and build suspense. But that's obviously only as a challenge if you have succeeded in including colons in the correct way. So normally in a lesson now, I do a model write. So hopefully this makes it really, really clear what's on the screen now of what you might want to write in your paragraph. Obviously, I want to see yours written differently because I know you all have really excellent ideas and are completely capable of writing your own paragraph. So I've color coded it here. So this first sentence in red explains how Florian feels. Remember, he's referring to Florian. It's got to be in first person too, because it's Florian's perspective. How does Florian feel when he sees the Russian splattered over Amelia? Because you might remember in the Salt to Sea book, he saved Amelia from the Russian, and he did so by shooting the Russian. But as a result, the Russian went over Amelia. So that's just recapping on Salt to the Sea knowledge. So I wrote here, when I looked at the pitiful girl, I spotted the remnants of the dead Russian splattered over her. I was able to feel only one thing, numb. I was so used to this by now that I felt nothing. So that's me describing how Florian would feel writing a diary entry when he saw the Russian splattered over Amelia. You can see quite clearly here that I've got a colon between thing and numb, because the colons here is being used before a list of how he's feeling or to introduce how he's feeling. Thinking of other examples of what we might use, and you might want to pause the video now and really, really think what you're going to write in your paragraph for how Florian felt when he saw Russian splatter over Amelia. Just to give you some ideas, if you want them, perhaps he felt sick. So rather than feeling nothing, you might want to say, I felt nauseous. At least I was able to feel something. And you can have a colon separating those clauses. Or you could say he felt dazed. Or maybe when I looked at the sorrowful girl, I looked shocked. It still surprised me that I was able to kill people so easily. So it could be a plethora of reasons of how he'd feel at this point. So it might be a nice idea now to pause the video and write down your first sentence of how Florian would feel when he saw the Russian splatter over Amelia, but remembering to include colons in your writing. So in the second sentence here, you can see it's coded in purple, and that has, what has Florian eaten recently? So my example of a sentence here is, my stomach grumbled, bring me back to reality. All I'd eaten recently was, colon, a stolen sausage and some berries from a bush. So you can see in this example here, colon's been used before a list, and that's to list what he's eaten recently. I used my stomach grumbled because that's not nice show, not tell, and that's a really nice technique to use in Year 6 writing too. So that was my idea of what could be written about now. But your idea could be something completely different. So maybe he's eaten recently, or maybe you could say, luckily, I didn't feel too hungry because it was only recently that I managed to steal the sausage from the dead Russian. Or the previous day, I managed to break into a building and steal what food there was so I didn't feel too hungry. Or my stomach roared so loudly that I thought it woke everyone up. Or maybe I craved food so badly that I felt weak at the knees. And then describe, I haven't managed to eat it in a whole week. This was my whole time record, or something like that. So it might be a nice opportunity now to pause the video and think, what are you going to write in your diary entry from Florian? What has he eaten recently? Remembering he's been walking a lot on foot and he won't have food readily available. Okay, and now for the last example, he's talking about sleep. So he's covered how he feels when he sees the Russian, he's covered what he's eaten recently, and now he's going to cover sleep. So obviously we know, because he's a refugee during the Second World War, he might have been walking for a very long time. He's not used to it. He's not in his normal sleeping conditions. Also, you've got to remember that we know it's going to be really, really cold here at night time, because that was said earlier in the book. All of these kind of imply that he's not going to have slept very well. So I wrote here, as for sleep, let's say that's a far distant memory now, and it's an ellipsis at the end for dramatic effect. So you might want to say in yours, the last time I slept was, and then do a colon to say when it was, or you might even want to mention the nightmares he's been having to sleep. You might want to mention sleep in that way, because obviously he won't be particularly happy at this point in time. He might say, my sleep has been ruined the last couple of nights by my distinct memories of the dead, I don't know, the dead Russian in the previous town or something like that. So he might have memories of the people he's killed coming back to him, disrupting his sleep. So the last sentence here, please try and write about how he slept recently, but remembering to include colons in your work. So I didn't include a colon in this last sentence, but this would be a good opportunity to up-level that and make sure you get a colon a few times in your writing. So hopefully that's really nicely explained what you have to do for your independent tasks. I can't wait to see your work on Seesaw.